Translation. Who in human society can be satisfied without hearing sufficient talk of the Lord, whose lotus feet are the sum total of all places of pilgrimage, and who is worshipped by great sages and devotees? Such topics can cut off one's bondage to family affection simply by entering the holes of one's ears. Please repeat. Who in human society can be satisfied without hearing sufficient talk of the Lord, whose lotus feet are the sum total of all places of pilgrimage, and who is worshipped by great sages and devotees. Such topics can cut off one's bondage to family. Let's do it one more time, that one. One's bondage to family affection simply by entering the holes of one's ears. Purport. It's quite a lengthy one, so kindly bear with me, please. Hare Krishna. We're just going to test if we are qualified to sit in like sages of Naimisharanya, or qualified like sages present when Parikshit Maharaj was receiving Srimad Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna. Krishna Katha is so powerful that simply by entering into a person's ear, it can at once give deliverance from the bondage of family affection. Family affection is an illusory manifestation of the external energy, and it is the only impetus for all mundane activities. As long as there is mundane activity and the mind is absorbed in such engagement, one has to undergo the repetition of birth and death in the current material science. People are most influenced by the mode of ignorance, and some are influenced by the passionate mode of material nature. And under the spell of these two modes, a living being is actuated by the material conception of life. The mundane qualities do not allow a living entity to understand his real position. The qualities of both ignorance and passion strongly bind one to the illusory bodily conception of the self. The best among the fools who are thus deluded are those who engage in altruistic activities under the spell of material mode of passion. Bhagavad Gita, which is the direct Krishna Katha, gives humanity the elementary lesson that the body is perishable and that the consciousness which is spread throughout the body is imperishable. The conscious being, the imperishable self, is eternally existent and cannot be killed under any circumstances, even after the dissolution of the body. Anyone who misunderstands this perishable body to be the self and who works for it in the name of sociology, politics, philanthropy, altruism, nationalism, or internationalism under the false plea of the bodily conception of life is certainly a fool and does not know the implications of reality and unreality. Some of them are above the modes of ignorance and passion and are situated in the mode of goodness. But mundane goodness is always contaminated by tinges of ignorance and passion. Mundane goodness can enlighten one that the body and the self are different, and one in goodness is concerned with the self and not the body. But due to being contaminated, those in mundane goodness cannot understand the real nature of the self as a person. Their impersonal conception of the self as distinct from the body keeps them in the mode of goodness within material nature. And unless they are attracted by Krishna Katha, they will never be liberated from the bondage of material existence. Krishna Katha is the only remedy for all people of the world because it can situate one in pure consciousness of the self and liberate one from material bondage. To preach Krishna Katha all over the world, as recommended by Lord Chaitanya, is the greatest missionary activity. And all sensible men and women of the world may join in this great movement started by Lord Chaitanya. Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakayam Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavari Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Thank you so much for coming again. I ask for blessings from all the senior Vaishnavas present in the room and those which are online, especially His Grace Yadubar Prabhu. Please bestow your blessings so we can say something which is useful, palatable, and practically applicable to our day-to-day Krishna consciousness. Vanchakalpa turupescha kripa sindhu bhyaevacha patitanam pavinebhyo vaishnavyo namo namaha anantakoti vaishnav vrindaki. Hare Krishna. So, I tried my best yesterday when we came back from this retreat to put a presentation together. See how it goes. Can you see it? Okay. So interesting, the way the verse started, or in the text, they said, who can be satisfied? The question is posed, who is that person? What are those qualifications? What are those necessities for actual satisfaction? The principal fundamental nature of the soul is to be satisfied, to search for satisfaction, to enjoy satisfaction, and ultimately it's something which is part of who we are, to be satisfied. Therefore, in this material world, the question is asked, who can be satisfied? So, based on the theme, based on the purports, we sort of contemplated three possible themes: the reason, the vision, and the mission. Srila Prabhupada emphasized in the end of his purport what is the actual mission. The reason, how these three modes of material nature are actually functioning, and how we can just, by grasping the fundamental knowledge of the three modes of material nature, how we can actually battle with them, and how we can actually use them to our advantage eventually. It's very interesting in the Bhagavad Gita, just right there in the second chapter, every esoteric point is already revealed. Everything that people in the outside world are considering very, very esoteric. Topics about reincarnation, topics about karma, topics about principle of practice for spiritual elevation. But interestingly, the way that Bhagavad Gita ends, it's on how to understand our karma, our abilities, our situation in the greater social structure for our advantage. So the principal way that Bhagavad Gita ended was be real. Let's be real. You are a spirit soul, but you are in a material world. And you have abilities and disabilities. You have certain gunas that you operate in. You have certain qualities that you possess. Therefore, let's understand them and utilize them correctly for ultimately getting out from this material world. So we've been discussing or contemplating about the reasons. Prabhupada speaks about how family life is a manifestation of desire for sense enjoyment. And ultimately it comes out eventually. But another good thing about Krishna consciousness and generally the Varnashram system is that what is considered in the mundane world to be an obstacle or to be way of bondage, it's, if correctly utilized and approached, way of liberation. I think this was said many times before, so that's nothing new for us to understand that Varna and Ashram, it's a principal need for advancing devotee. We are not Paramahamsas, speaking for myself, we are not Paramahamsas, we are not pure devotees. So we should utilize any possible chance, any possible structure to actually advance in Krishna consciousness. And this is what ultimately Varnashram means. It's interesting, Prabhupada writes here, the best among the fools who are thus deluded are those who engage in altruistic activities under the spell of material mode of passion. So modern world is very much glorifying these altruistic people, right? You gave such a great charitable gift to this and this organization. You gave your support, your contacts, your managerial skill to, build a hospital, to create this type of infrastructure, to create roads, to make sure that water is running, to make sure that electricity is there. All these varieties of different things. But here Srimad Bhagavatam or Srila Prabhupada is just not messing around. They said it's everything in a mode of passion. It is nice, but considering the ultimate prayojana, the ultimate goal, which is elevation from the material modes, this is just in the mode of passion. Nothing extraordinary. And I was meditating, why is this? Because we as Vaishnavas, we can't really function without these necessities. How we can function without water? You need to be socham, you need to be clean. How you can function without electricity? How you can serve the deities without having gas? And the interesting concept is that the moment you start engaging in practicalities of Krishna Bhakti, all these other necessities, they will perfectly click into the concept of devotional practice. So what the Bhagavatam and the Acharyas are trying to say, don't necessarily emphasize the altruistic way of lifestyle, but rather emphasize the spiritual bhakti process. And naturally all the other ones will just fall in. So this one is the second one, the vision. I found it quite interesting when I was doing research on this. So at the moment I'm reading Madhurya Kadambini by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And I have a very nice book here, Sri Prema Bhakti Chandrika by Narottam Das Thakur. And there are some interesting things which I think can align with the message of this particular Bhagavatam class. So Prabhupada told us there are 3 kleshas, right? Can anyone tell me? What are those 3 kleshas? Adibautik, Adhyatmik, Adidevik, exactly. Well, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says there are actually 5 kleshas. Avidya, Asmita, Raga, Dvesha, and Abnivesha. And this is very interesting. Why to bring up these points out? Association that we practice with the modes of material nature, either be goodness, passion, or ignorance, have their elementary foundation in false ego. In the way that false ego is churning things around us, the way that, you see, think about the 3 modes of material nature as a hardware or as a physical manifestation of your desires. And think about these kleshas as a very subtle software which is implemented and incorporated in our way of thinking. Avidya, Asmita, Raga, Dvesha, and Abnivesha are 5 subtle and internal ways of functioning of individual souls. Or at least we can say the way that the soul interacts with the modes of material nature, and the medium between the interaction medium between the modes are these kleshas. If they're kleshas, in a sense, they're miseries. And let's find something very interesting. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur identified kleshas or causes of suffering not only in impactful negative occurrences, but rather also in positive circumstances. Even positivity can be considered a klesha or a point of suffering. And this is very interesting, but we're going to explore it more. Anyone can tell me what avidya means in Sanskrit? Exactly. Ignorance. So this is the first initial klesha or point of suffering. Why ignorance? Why are we distributing Prabhupada's books? Why are we engaging us and the public with, let's say, book distribution? To mitigate the principal and most important factor of struggle and difficulties in the material world, and that is ignorance. This is what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes. Means to mistake that which is impermanent to be permanent, to mistake that which is full of misery to be blissful, and to mistake what is not the self to be the self. This is great ignorance. That's why one of the things I ask on Sankirtan is very simple question. And 99% of people, they don't know how to answer, and that 1% is speculating. And it's a one-on-one question of life. Who are you? Simple question like this. Who are you? People are not trained to ask these type of questions. Who are you? And based on the answer, they say, oh, I'm a metaphysical mind floating or encapsulated in a body. Okay, this guy is on the level of the mind. Okay, cool. Let's present the books on this level. They said, well, my name is Joe. Okay, this guy is on the physical sort of understanding of what Atma or the self means. Cool. Let me speak with Joe on this principle of Bhagavad Gita. Someone says, I'm a soul. Very good. Are you sure? Are you truly sure, 100% sure? Would you put your hand in the fire that you are a soul? And then if you churn in a bit with them, they say, no, I don't know actually. So the principal foundation of klesha or suffering or miseries in life is identification, which stems from ignorance. This is what Srila Prabhupada writes in this particular purport. Family affection is an illusory manifestation of the external energy and is the only impetus for all mundane activities. As long as there is mundane activity and the mind is absorbed in such engagement, one has to undergo the repetition of birth and death in the current material and the science. Family affection is an illusory manifestation of the external energy. So many points packed just in one sentence by Srila Prabhupada. Illusory manifestation of external energy. So if in the moment you think that you are the body, then naturally there's a sequence of things which have to happen. And what the avidya or ignorance, what these books are battling, or this science or this philosophy is fighting against, is giving us a different angle and different perspective. But with that said, there are two angles to this. Yes, I'm not the body, I'm a soul. That's concept of Sanatana Dharma. But I am a soul and I have a body and I have needs and I have limitations and I have anxieties and I have things and I'm not even fully 100% sure that I am a soul. What does that mean? Swadharma. Okay, I'm not the body, I'm a soul, but I am a soul inside of the body. What type of body? What type of limitations? What type of brain thinking you have? What level of intelligence you possess? What level of intellectual, spiritual, and emotional intelligence you have? Whatever answer that may be, use it correctly. Because if we're not real with ourselves, then the process will not work. So that was the first klesha, or ignorance. Klesha number 2, false ego. The bodily identification of me and mine. Basically, in other words, ahamameti. But Srila Prabhupada writes, the qualities of both ignorance and passion strongly bind one to the illusory bodily conception of the self. The best among the fools who are thus deluded are those who engage in altruistic activities under the spell of material mode of passion. So again, false ego. It is said that when the soul enters the material creation, the first layer of contamination which it sort of encapsulates the soul is the ahankar, the false ego. Naturally so. Rightfully so. Scientifically so. Why? How you can be situated in the material world and thinking that you are truly of spiritual nature. You cannot enjoy, you cannot interact with the material mode. You cannot perpetrate your sort of machinations and activities in the material realm. That's why the first layer, first covering is the ahankar. And ahankar is the active impetus for you to engage with the three modes. Therefore, this is the second klesha, the false ego, which is called asmita. The third klesha, the attachment, or in other words, raga. You heard about the term raga? Raga has different connotations, right? It has a spiritual connotation and a material connotation. But ultimately, we don't have a choice. We always have to be attached to something, to someone, to some type of a process. The choice is yours. Ultimately, all the choices in the material world can boil down only to two primeval choices. Krishna or Maya? Illusion or reality? To desire the material happiness and the means that provide it, this is also considered to be an obstacle in the process of spirituality or Krishna consciousness. To desire material happiness on its own, it's a klesha. It's a means of suffering. Is that correct? Would you say, if you start desiring, contemplating the objects of your senses, you develop attachment for those objects. And if this attachment is not facilitated, positive or negative attachment, if this attachment is not facilitated, we may develop anger issues, desire issues, which later on may lead us to the spiral of fall down, eventually leading to even deeper, in the Bhagavad Gita 262 and 63, deeper material contamination. So ultimately, we should be very careful what we desire and wish for. Because even, what's the saying? Good path to fall down is, say that again? Yes, road to hell is paved with good intentions. So road to miserable situation is paved with desire for material happiness, even personal or extended in a wide perspective of like national happiness, continental happiness, race happiness, cultural happiness. Prabhupada writes as follows: anyone who misunderstands this perishable body to be the self and who works for it in the name of sociology, politics, philanthropy, altruism, nationalism, or internationalism under the false plea of the bodily conception of life is certainly a fool and does not know the implications of reality and unreality. So this is a klesha. Desiring material happiness is actually an obstacle for spiritual advancement. Because for that happiness you start being selective about my happiness, my family happiness, my country happiness, my race happiness, and happiness in majority ends up reducing happiness of someone else. Right? Let's say there is one heart, but two patients waiting for that heart. I get it, you don't. My happiness, you're bad. Let's say one country wants to be prosperous. One country wants to expand. One country wants to raise the material happiness and acquisition of its citizens and inhabitants. Well, let's invade other country. My happiness, you're not. Therefore, whatever activities and plans you put in like whatever plans you planning to do, it means that someone will be eventually, to a certain degree, limited by your plans for happiness. That's how this is a klesha. Another klesha, hatred, very powerful one. Someone can burn in hatred, the aversion to unhappiness or the cause of unhappiness. So we can be resentful of being in situations which will not allow us to be happy. And this is very interesting. And I found this beautiful quotation from Narottam Das Thakur in Srimad Bhakti Chandrika. I will engage lust, anger, greed, illusion, envy, and pride in their proper places. In this way, I will defeat the enemies, and with ecstasy in my heart, I'll worship Govinda without difficulty. Really? How is that even possible? That's a really hard statement. Well, this is what he writes next. I will engage my lust in eagerness to serve Krishna, and I will use my anger against those who are envious of the devotees. I will be greedy to hear the topics of Hari in the association of devotees. I will be illusioned if I fail to achieve my worshipable Lord, and I will feel proud to chant the glories of Krishna. In this way, I will engage them in their respective duties. Isn't that amazing? I was speaking to one Christian gentleman on the street, and he was going through all these sinful sinful proclivities or sins. Can you tell me which are those? Because I can't remember really. Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda ki, Shri Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki, Shri Shri Gaurnitai ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Right, there's, where is it? Is it there lust, anger, gluttony? Anyone knows? Wrath. Yeah, let's say there's 6 of them in total, correct? 7, alright, 7. And as we've been discussing, we went through a point where we've been trying to dovetail all these 7 sinful activities and how we can actually see Krishna or Lord being present and give a sort of a dovetail them in a spiritual fashion, in a spiritual way. And he asked me a question. We'd been discussing lust, and he was speaking that he said he was struggling very much with lust. And I said the reason why we struggle with lust is because we disconnect this lust from the Lord. I said, if you hanker for association of the opposite sex, rather than struggling with that sense of lust, you can appreciate the beauty, saying that whatever beauty manifests in this world, it ultimately comes from Krishna, from God. And then I used the Prabhupada analogy when he caught the attention of the sannyasis. He said, if she is beautiful, imagine how Krishna must be beautiful. So we discuss about this, how all the fall downs and sins can be actually dovetailed and understood with the correct vidya. So why to practice hatred? Hatred is just a manifestation of an obstacle in our desires. So all of these kleshas, there's a last one. Long-standing obsessions. Stemming from past lifetimes with certain material things and the means of taming them. An obsession with the body and with the fear of death. This is what Narottam Das Thakur writes. Please give up all duplicity, illusory activities and the search for bodily happiness. Do not be attached for the worship of various demigods. Mundane love and affection for material relationships attracts everyone to their respective illusions, and thus advancement on the path of devotional service is checked. So long-standing obsessions, there are these ahankars, these hankerings, these subtle bubbles which can erupt and pop any time and any point and any moment given. And these desires, they actively create this impetus for us to ask and interact with the 3 modes of material nature. Therefore, in this Prema Bhakti Chandrika, Narottam Das Thakur very much prays to the mind. He prays, please dear mind, allow me and help me to overcome these obstacles and limitations stemming from my previous association with the modes of material nature. Please give me the strength to avoid these kleshas, these attachments, these hankerings, and these points of suffering within my mind. Then there was another very interesting concept, and that is, this comes from the Madhurya Kadambini. What is that meeting point? Obviously, we've been speaking very much about the obstacles and challenges, the kleshas, the points of suffering. But naturally, we are devotees and we try to engage in the process of sadhana bhakti. So what are the effects of practicing sadhana bhakti? And where is that point? We mentioned the term raga. Where is that point when raga, or attachment and taste, meets, and when the process of sadhana bhakti meets with raga? You see, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives this very, very nice analogy of a creeper, of a bhakti lata, which produces, as you can see here, 2 leaves. On the outside, external and internal part of these leaves, there is a pressure of sadhana bhakti, which internally creates changes internally, which allows to erupt of attachment or raga. Right? You have sadhana bhakti, then you have raganuga bhakti, and eventually you have ragatmika bhakti. So the 2 leaves, one of them is klesha agni, or the dissolution of the kleshas, of the sufferings that are produced by our interaction with the modes of material nature. So kleshagni means that these sufferings on the level of the mind, on the level of the body, even the level of the mind, the way we interact with others, because this is also a very important klesha. The way that others give suffering to us ultimately boils down to the way that we perceive that suffering given to us by others. Let me tell you a beautiful story. Haridas Thakur, when he was beaten, how many marketplaces? 21, 22? 20? 22 marketplaces. In Chaitanya Bhagavat is such a profoundly beautiful narration of this pastime that he was not perceiving this beating. In Chaitanya Bhagavat he was writing, Krishna Das Kaviraj, Vrindavan Das Thakur, he was writing, this is all due my previous hankerings, all due to my previous karma. The Lord is so merciful that He's clarifying and purifying my karma now by getting beaten in 22 marketplaces. So even that klesha, others give me difficulties, can ultimately be beaten on your own turf by your own mental and spiritual and approach of the mind towards that other person. And the thing is very simple. Rather than reaching out and pointing out, this is his mistake, her mistake, his difficulty, his obstacle, his challenge. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he is my greatest friend. Why? Because he's showing me the impurities and the internal challenges that I face towards others. Just by changing the perspective, everything changes. And this is what sadhana bhakti does. It destroys the kleshas. Because we engage in studying the Bhakti Shastras, because we engage in chanting the holy name, because we engage in the process of devotion, these kleshas start receiving different perspective. And they will have a different perspective for us. And another leaf on another point of is Shubhada, the attainment of auspicious qualities. Right? In Bhagavatam it says, on Bhagavad Gita, those devotees or those which engage in practicing of sadhana bhakti or path of devotion, they will receive all the auspicious qualities and attributes of demigods. So naturally what happens, disillusions of kleshas and attainment of auspicious qualities. But this is not where we stop as devotees. It's not only about disillusion, about dismantling these kleshas and attaining something which is shubha, something which is auspicious and pure. We actually not even, and this is another sort of if we just stop there, we need to continue even further to actually develop pure unalloyed attachment. So in the Madhurya Kandambini, it is said that when these two are meeting, this kleshagni and shubhada, this is actually the meeting wall between raga and Vaidhi Bhakti, between the practice of sadhana bhakti or Vaidhi Bhakti, and this is where raga meets. These qualities, this kleshagni and shubhada, this cutting line is when raga and Vaidhi Bhakti meets. Because attainment of auspicious qualities means that we naturally start developing attraction for something of subtle nature. Something we develop attraction for, reading Prabhupada's books. We develop attachment for chanting the holy name. We develop attachment for purity, for cleanliness, for good qualities. And ultimately the means and lakshana of advancement of devotees is actually a character. Character is the greatest indication of spiritual advancement. So again, just to summarize, the meeting point of raga and Vaidhi Bhakti is kleshagni and shubhada. Dissolution or dismantling of the unnecessary kleshas and our perspective on them, and attaining of auspicious qualities. And the third point, the mission, which Prabhupada was mentioning in his last section of the purport. An interesting thing when you engage in this Krishna Katha, what happens in engagement of Krishna Katha, you see, the mind constantly desires and needs something to perform, some activity, some meditation, some desires. So one of the most important things of Krishna Katha, it allows us to purify our desires. This is very, very important, very crucial for us to understand. If you have problems with your desires, engage in reading Krishna book. Engage in reading Bhagavatam. Engage in reading Chaitanya Charitamrita. Because why? The desires of those pure devotees in those particular books will rub off you, and you just might get some of those desires. Read things which can eventually align and realign your desires. And that's one of the gifts of Krishna Katha. The desires alignment. And by distributing it, by sharing this Krishna Katha with others, ultimately we become purified, others become purified, everyone will be purified. Most auspicious. So I'll finish there with the class in Srimad Bhagavatam. But today we're also celebrating a very, very auspicious disappearance of Sri Ramananda Roy. I'm not going to be speaking about his birth or where he lived. There are some points mentioned here. One thing, I'm entering now in the Madhya Lila again, the Ramananda Roy Samvad, when Lord Chaitanya is in South India and he met Ramananda Roy. And now we can see that how Lord Chaitanya is utilizing Ramananda Roy to enhance his ecstatic symptoms and appreciation of the divine couple. So we can see the predominant feature of Ramananda Roy is to study, again, read Bhagavatam and churn Bhagavatam to its essence for the pleasure of Lord Chaitanya. And again, we can see if the desire of Ramananda Roy will not be aligned with Lord Chaitanya, how he can become the most auspicious cloud which rains upon the ocean of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's divine qualities and his divine taste and his divine attraction for Krishna Katha. So Ramananda Roy became a right and confident tool for Lord Chaitanya to sort of not understand, that's not the right word. For Lord Chaitanya to engage in these beautiful pastimes and activities. Ramananda Roy and Swarup Damodar were the two most confidential servants of Lord Chaitanya in intimacy. Once I spoke with my spiritual master, His Holiness Kadamba Kanana Swami Maharaj, and he opened up a conversation about my name. He said, Antaranga Das. He said, do you know why I gave you this name? And he said, do you know where this name comes from? I was like, Maharaj, you wrote it on the paper. It means the servant of internal energy of Krishna. He said, yes. But in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antaranga also means intimate. He said, Antaranga Bhakta or Antaranga Bhakti means those devotees which are very intimately connected with Lord Chaitanya. And then he said, who are those devotees which are Antaranga Bhaktas? He said, Swarup Damodar, Ramananda Roy, and many others which are in the internal circle around Lord Chaitanya. So Antaranga Bhakti means very confidential way of serving the Supreme Lord. And that confidence comes in a form and shape of discussing confidential themes and confidential topics with Lord Chaitanya. So the disappearance or glorious disappearance of Ramananda Roy indicates to us as practicing sadhakas that confidentiality with the Lord is not something cheap and not something easy and cheaply to take, but rather it's based on our deep absorption and understanding of the mood and desires of Krishna, Lord Gauranga, and Guru. The closer you are to Guru, the more you understand the heart of the spiritual master, which means ultimately to engage anyone and everyone in the service of the divine couple. So I'll finish here. Thank you so much for your good attention. If there are any points, questions, or realizations, please do share. How do I engage my lust? How do I engage lust in serving Krishna? I was meditating on this question recently because, with hand on the heart, we have lust in our heart, 100%. But the way which for me works the most, and the most practical way, is actually engage yourself in reading the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. Because that mundane lust, which is in our mind and in our hearts, if you, rather than focusing on yourself, this is my lust, then if you start reading, like for instance, this book, Prema Bhakti Chandrika, is phenomenal, so beautiful. It's kind of it's a fine line between esoteric points, but very down-to-earth perspective on those esoteric points. That's why they said that this Prema Bhakti Chandrika, it's a mature manifestation of Narottam Das Thakur's understanding of the philosophy of Rupa Sanatan. He took the very difficult to understand concepts of the Goswamis and put it in such a beautiful Bengali poetry, in such a way that people can grasp these concepts. So I found that if you read, if there is lust in our heart, and if we engage in reading pastimes of Radha and Krishna, then that mundane lust eventually can get purified. Srila Prabhupada instructed Krishna book to be distributed. He said that Krishna book should be distributed for the benefit of others. Therefore, majority of people out there have lust, greed, anger in big capacity. So even for us as practicing devotees, if we struggle with these attributes, we should engage them in reading and studying and observing the beautiful relationship with the Sakis, Gopis, Manjaris, Radha, Krishna, and engage in and study them and read them. And for me, it works that lust diminishes. Then, as it was presented in the Madhurya Kadambini, then we need to change something in our sadhana bhakti. Because in that case, if we think, or if we don't have that raga, or attachment, or a taste, or even lobha, hankering for that actual pastimes, then we should intensify Vaidhi bhakti, chanting, and maybe perform some tapasya, take vratas. But just the way that you see, also our entry level to these pastimes is through the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. So if Acharya sort of gives instruction to go through this path and reading Krishna book and present it to the masses, that means there's a certain level of sanction and spiritual empowerment. Because Prabhupada, he knew which shastras to present to the wider society and which not. And he said Krishna book, yes. Therefore, that means that there is some sort of a allowance for us to enter into those pastimes and read them. And we are devotees. We come for Mangalarti, we see deities, we chant Hare Krishna, read books, we gave our life. Means who else has that qualification to enter these pastimes? Devotees. There was also a point by Parajana Prabhu. Maybe we can discuss later, Taruna Prabhu. Parajana Prabhu, do you have a question? I'm just gonna repeat what you said for the devotees which are hearing. So Parajana Prabhu mentioned, if I understood correctly, that in Christianity there is this concept you should not take Lord's name in vain. And then you explained that how vain means vanity, but vanity means doing something for ourselves. Therefore, if the devotees are taking or chanting Krishna's name, they chant for his pleasure. Therefore, that's not considered to be a vanity. That's a very interesting point. Thank you so much, Parajana Prabhu. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaura Premanande.